Barchive.
Welcome in, Barchivist.
And here on Into the Barchive, this is the show where we dig through the footnotes, the forgotten names, and the overlooked pages of cocktail history to better understand what's actually in our glass.
And February is Black History Month, so
Today we're going to focus on someone whose name should be as familiar as Jerry Thomas or Harry Johnson, but too often it isn't.
And who is this?
Tom Bullock.
Tell me more.
Bullock was a working bartender at the highest levels of American hospitality at the turn of the century, and in 1917 he published the book, The Ideal Bartender.
I know that book.
Yeah, I mean, it's one that, at least now in 2026, most people working in the industry who know, like, cocktails, like, historically, he's begun to make his way into that conversation, but this was the very first cocktail book written by an African American, and not only that, it's one of the clearest windows we have into pre-Prohibition bar culture.
Tell me more.
Well, what makes Bullock remarkable isn't just that he published a book in an era where Black expertise was routinely ignored or erased. It's that his writing is calm, confident, it's technical. It's no salesmanship. It's no myth-making. Bullock writes like someone who knows that good bartending speaks for itself. His recipes assume competence, they assume standards, and they assume the person behind the bar understands their responsibility to the drink itself and to the guest. And you know, that matters, because for much of American history, Black bartenders were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They ran hotel bars, club bars, and private bars. They trained generations of bartenders, and yet when cocktail history was later written down, their names were often left out. Bullock gives us something rare, and that's documentation, a voice, proof that African American bartenders weren't just participating in American drinking culture, they were shaping it.
All right, so today we're talking about the man.
Yep, the book, and the broader tradition of African American bartending that surrounds both. And along the way, we're going to be making two drinks that help illustrate Bullock's world. The overall julep and the Busy Izzy highball.
Let's get shaken.
Let's do it.
The first cocktail that we're going to make from Tom Bullock is the overall julep. When I first saw this recipe, it threw me for a loop because a julep is not served in a Collins glass. But stick with me here. In our shaking tin, we're going to put 1 ounce of rye. Much like in episodes past, you know Tim likes to go a little split-based. We're going to do equal parts of a gin. We'll do 1 ounce of gin. Next, we'll go a 1/2 ounce of the remaining ingredients, starting with grenadine. Notice this isn't that fake high fructose cornstarch red color that you would get from a jar in the grocery store. This is grenadine that we have purposefully made using pomegranate juice, sugar, and maybe some additional aromatics. 1/2 ounce of grenadine. 1/2 ounce of fresh lemon juice. And lastly, before we start shaking, 1/2 ounce of fresh lime juice. All into our shaking tin. We'll add some ice. Ingredients in, small to big. Let's start shaking. 10 to 15 seconds. Based on speed, your time may vary. Crack the tin. And now let's put some ice into our glass. As we like to use around here, we got what would be considered our version of some cold draft cubes. Sometimes they do stick together, but that's fine. They can still make a pretty little drink. And now let's strain into our glass. Pouring to the side of the cubes and making sure that there's enough room left. We are now going to top with soda water. Soda water from our soda siphon. By doing so off the cubes, allows it to naturally mix without needing to put a straw or another stir stick in there. And we'll garnish with a lemon wheel. Don't be afraid if you're at the house and you've been using your citrus for their essential oils for garnish. Go ahead and use the same ones. It's perfectly fine as a garnish for your cocktail here. And now we have our overall julep. Cheers.
And I'm going to be making the Busy Izzy Highball, another Tom Bullock original from his 1917 book, The Ideal Bartender. So this is another shaken drink where we top off with some club soda, much like the overall julep. For this one, it's a split base as well. We're going to use an ounce of our rye whiskey and add that to our small tin. In the book, he calls for dry sherry. So, that's not like super precise in a traditional sense. So, for this drink, I'm using an Oloroso sherry. That's maybe a touch sweet. Maybe if you had an Amontillado sherry, it'd be a little drier than the Oloroso because the Amontillado stands between a bone-dry Fino and this little richer Oloroso. But I would definitely avoid using something sweeter like a cream sherry or certainly not a Pedro Jimenez. So this is kind of on the sweet end of dry here with the Oloroso. So I added an ounce of that. From there, we're going to add a half ounce of our pineapple juice. And then a half ounce of lemon juice. He really liked the multiple juice blends. And then instead of grenadine, we're going to use Demerara syrup. So in many ways, the proportions on the Busy Izzy julep are identical to the overall julep. Just changing out some of the ingredients, like the sherry for the gin, the pineapple for the lime, and then the syrups. So we'll throw our Demerara syrup in there, and now we'll add ice to the big pan and get ready to shake. So create our seal, 10 to 15 seconds. All right. From here, we're going to add some of those cold draft by cubes to our highball glass. Now, of course, you could do, if you had ice spears, you could do that. You could do other types of ice, but cubes are probably best. In the book, Bullock talks about lump ice, so I thought going with the cold draft style cubes would be more authentic to his historical intent. So from there, we'll strain our shaken cocktail into the glass. And then finally, just like the overall julep, we'll add some soda water from our soda siphon. Again, try to shoot it off the ice directly into the drink. And to garnish, Tom Bullock called for a cherry. So I've got a nice Amarena cherry on a pick to stick into our cocktail and finish it with a straw. And we have the Busy Izzy highball. Cheers.
As always, now that we've built the cocktails, let's build the context.
Yep.
Blake, who was Tom Bullock?
Well, even though he wrote an entire book, we know precious little about Tom Bullock the man. What best we can tell, Bullock was born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1872.
Okay.
And then he started working as a bellboy at the Pendennis Club.
And that is?
Like social club in Louisville. And eventually, at some point, he learned the trade of bartending and then left and moved to St. Louis to be the bartender for the St. Louis Country Club in St. Louis, Missouri. He served a lot of elite clientele there, including August Busch Sr. of what is now Anheuser-Busch.
Yes.
Right? So during this time, of course, when Bullock is working, he's living in a time of Jim Crow America, where you have segregation laws that were very prescriptive about separating the races, and it limited opportunities for Black bartenders and African Americans, frankly, in pretty much any profession. And while a Black person could be a bellhop, a bartender, a cook, oftentimes it was more difficult for them to ascend to the higher levels of leadership, even in industries like hospitality, where they tended to be very prominent.
Always the bartender, not the director of bar services.
Yeah, more or less. And so by the time we get to Prohibition, we really just lose track of Bullock altogether in the historical record. You know, some people believe that he continued to serve alcohol during Prohibition. He remained employed at the St. Louis Country Club for a couple more years after the beginning of Prohibition, but we don't know anything specifically about exactly what his duties were. But then he mysteriously disappears from public records altogether after 1927. And most historians generally accept that he did not die until 1964, but we essentially know nothing about Bullock's life between 1927 and 1964. That's it.
Little to know about the man other than what's captured prior to that time. Then what else can we discern from this? Do we look at the bartender book?
Yeah, and I mean, even then, the book itself is not very revealing about Bullock. Like, if you read the book, it's the foreword, then a series of recipes. There's very little, practically no commentary from Bullock himself to kind of give us a sense of who he was as a person, his philosophy of bartending. So a lot of it we're having to read between the lines here. Some of it we're getting from other sources. people who knew Bullock and talked about him. For instance, the book, The Ideal Bartender itself was born out of controversy.
I like controversy.
Well, and this one's a doozy.
Okay, tell me about it.
So during the 1912 presidential election, so you had William Howard Taft, the incumbent Republican, running against Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat.
Okay.
Theodore Roosevelt, who had been a former president, decided to come out of retirement and start a third party, the Bull Moose Progressive Party. And then there was Eugene V. Debs, who ran on the socialist ticket. So it was a four-way presidential race. And there were persistent rumors throughout the race that Theodore Roosevelt was a secret drunk.
I mean, there had been some scuttlebutt that he liked to partake, yes.
So, but Roosevelt wouldn't have any of it.
Okay.
He sued for libel. And during the testimony for that lawsuit, the former president conceded under oath that since leaving the White House, that he had drank 2 mint juleps. And one occasion was at the St. Louis Country Club.
The same one that you mentioned that Bullock was working at.
Precisely. And he claimed while he was at the St. Louis Country Club, he had only taken a few sips of his julep. And so the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, in an editorial on May 28, 1913, wrote that Bullock's drinks were so good that Roosevelt possibly could not be telling the truth. They said, quote, "Who has ever known to drink just a part of Tom's? Tom, whom there is no greater mixologist of any race." And regardless of how much of the julep he drank, Roosevelt did go on to win the libel suit, but all of that national attention raised questions about who is this Tom Bullock? And so, with the help of patrons like August Busch Sr., who was the CEO of Anheuser-Busch, and another man named George Herbert Walker.
As in George Herbert Walker Bush?
Yep, George Herbert Walker was Bush Sr.'s grandfather.
Oh, granddaddy, okay.
Okay? And so, with patrons like George Herbert Walker and August Busch, they essentially patronized Bullock and allowed him to publish this book of cocktail recipes. In fact, George Herbert Walker wrote the foreword to The Ideal Bartender.
So when we get this book, you open it up right now, Granddaddy Bush is the person that writes this foreword for this mixologist that is unknown to many, but should be known to most.
Absolutely. In fact, Walker writes in his foreword, he says, quote, "For the past quarter of a century, he has refreshed and delighted the members and their friends of the Pendennis Club of Louisville and the St. Louis Country Club of St. Louis. And all that time, I doubt if he has erred in even one of his concoctions." I mean,
that's pretty high praise.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of skill that, you know, one of your most distinguished patrons is like, I don't think he's ever made a bad drink.
Like, I know on several occasions within the past month that I have made a bad drink.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, same. It's like, I'll try something, but Bullock was just next level. And so in his book, he shared over 170 different recipes. Now, most of these drinks were focused on refreshing drinks that for the warm weather of St. Louis. So, juleps,
yep,
fizzes, cobblers, and highballs. Hence why we have drinks like this. Can you imagine drinking this on a hot day in St. Louis, Missouri?
Oh, yeah. And especially in a social club setting, you can sip on it or you could pound it, either way, depending on what need you're trying to meet of the day, but refreshing nonetheless.
Absolutely. So this book is full of drinks like this. And beyond that, and this is where we get to that whole reading between the lines. Bullock's book demonstrates Black bartenders as authors, innovators, and authorities, not just as laborers, right? Like, he demonstrated, like, they were creators of cocktails and things like that, not just mere laborers behind the bar.
Mastery of the profession, again, not just stewards.
Exactly. Like, Bullock was a consummate professional, and he illustrates that Black bartenders served in those high performing roles, but a lot of times those stories never got told. He was just fortunate in being able to publish a book. And Bullock's book, again, it's walkers forward, and then it's more or less directly into the recipe. No talk about himself, no origin myth, no commentary claiming I invented this drink and all of that. The authority of Bullock's work entirely comes from the work itself, the recipes in the book.
The recipes speak for him.
Absolutely. And beyond its legacy as a book, because it was the first cocktail book created or written by an African-American author, The Ideal Bartender is historically significant beyond that, because it is one of the very last cocktail books published before Prohibition. So it captures the state of American bartending on the eve of Prohibition, like what sort of cocktails were being made. So it is historically significant for that reason as well.
As you tell this history, you say beyond the book, finding out more about this man becomes fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier.
Mm-hmm.
Then my only question then goes to the impact of other African American bartenders and the impact or contributions of those individuals pre or post Tom Bullock.
Well before Tom Bullock, other Black Americans were making significant contributions in the field of drinks, ranging from early distillers like Nearest Green,
Yes.
right, who teaches Jack Daniels the process of what we call now the Lincoln County of filtering the whiskey through charcoal or sugar maple charcoal. Like that was a significant contribution. I remember several years ago when we went to the Uncle Nearest facility, what captured me the most about that story was that essentially every part of the whiskey making process could be traced back to like Scotland or Ireland, with the exception of one, and that's the filtration. Whereas people in West Africa often use charcoal to like filter their water and things like that. People in Scotland and Ireland weren't doing that.
They had access to fresh water.
Or fresher
drinking water, yeah.
In comparison. And so like that's a major contribution. Another significant African-American figure like pre-Tom Bullock would be John Dabney in Richmond, Virginia, a Black bartender who creates the Hailstorm julep, right? And so he is like using all sorts of like shaved crushed ice and filling up julep cups, causing them to have like an intense frost around them where he would like affix fruit to it. And I mean, really created the predecessor of the modern mint julep. So, I mean, there are notable figures among Black Americans who have contributed to the drink space well before Bullock as well.
Talking about the Hellstorm, other techniques that come from these Black Americans as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that this book as it gives a book end to Prohibition,
Mm-hmm.
how does it kick back off after. We've talked about pre-Tom a couple, but let's talk post-Tom and post-Prohibition for Black Americans in this industry. Is there an avenue or a resurgence that you see coming from that now, especially as this book has been in republish?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I think I got my copy of this. I don't know if you've got a different copy, but
Yeah.
but reclaiming these stories, how is that coming back into focus now?
Yeah, so there are people who are trying to recapture some of these stories and kind of show the way forward. Books like Black Mixlets. There's one written by, it's called, I think, Juleps, Joints and Jazz. Give me just a second. I will tell you the exact title of that book. It escapes me at the moment. Joints, Jazz Clubs, and Juice, a cocktail recipe book by Tony Tipton Martin, who works for America's Test Kitchen.
So it's easier for Blake to like Google it than it is to go down to the library, his library, and go pull it off the wall.
Yeah, I have the book and I've read the book. It's just the exact title escaped me at the moment. But books like that, in terms of carrying on Bullock's legacy as an author in this genre, but you have other important figures like Jackie Summers, the distiller and owner of Sorrel, the hibiscus liqueur.
A very high quality liqueur that we love to use in many of our cocktails.
Yeah, I mean, and there are other sorts of distilled spirits, beers, wines that Black Americans, especially with the advances in civil rights, are finding new opportunities and capture those. I mean, again, because of the discrimination that they face, certainly there have been challenges along the way to catch back up. But there are programs that have been working. I believe one that's sponsored by Tales of the Cocktail is called Turning Tables.
Yep.
To try to get more people into the world of cocktails, distilled spirits, and like pave new ways of opportunity for them to excel.
As we draw this episode to a close, give me some last words about Tom.
Well, I think we need to understand Tom Bullock did not write The Ideal Bartender to make history. He wrote it to do his job well. To document recipes that worked, techniques that mattered, and standards that he believed should be upheld behind the bar. And in that way, his legacy feels especially modern. Bullock reminds us that great bartending isn't about spectacle. It's not about celebrity. It's about care, consistency, and respect for both the craft and the guest.
And you can see that in the foreword, right?
Absolutely. The way that George Herbert Walker talks about the quality of Bullock's work, and in many ways, what makes Bullock's work resonate today is how familiar it feels. His drinks are balanced, as evidenced
Very.
by the two we chose to make today. His instructions are precise. His assumptions that ice quality matters, like lump ice versus shaved ice and so on, that dilution matters, that presentation matters. These are the same assumptions that underpin the contemporary cocktail renaissance. And when we talk about bringing bartending back, when people have talked about that in the cocktail renaissance, we're often unknowingly talking about returning to standards that people like Bullock never abandoned.
As we are talking about Bullock for Black History Month, it does give us a moment to ask some harder questions.
Yeah, like whose stories get preserved, whose are allowed to fade. We're fortunate to know Tom Bullock because his books survive, but his name nearly didn't. Recovering his work isn't just about correcting the record, it's about understanding how much American cocktail culture has always depended on African American skill, knowledge, and labor, even when that contribution went uncredited. So as we put down our cocktails today, we're left with a simple but powerful takeaway. Technique is never neutral, and history is never accidental. The way drinks are made, taught, and remembered reflects who we choose to listen to and who we don't.
We thank you for listening to us. As we close out the episode, we do, however, ask that you please share this episode with a friend, or like or subscribe on one of our social media accounts. Not about us today. Go ahead, read more about Tom. Grab his book. Try his recipes. Enjoy some pretty damn good cocktails made at the highest level.
And next time on Into the Barchive, we'll zoom in to one of those techniques that Bullock really, assumed in terms of like being done to the highest standards of excellence. But sometimes modern bartenders love to debate.
Shaken versus stirred.
Right? And so we're going to use the gimlet as a case study and explore how these two approaches affect texture, temperature, dilution, and even how a drink announces itself when it hits the table.
So until then, keep reading those old books.
And keep asking who wrote them. And keep tasting history one drink at a time. And join us next time on Into the Barchive.